better take another close look.
Hi everyone, this is Sanjana Karthik, and I am here with the amazing Laura Marks from Small File Media Festival. And we're going to have an excellent interview today and get to know a little bit about her and the Small File Media Festival. And Laura, if you don't mind, could you share a little bit about yourself for the audience?
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm Laura Marks and I live in Vancouver and I teach at SFU in the School for the Contemporary Arts. And I'm the founder and creative director of the Small File Media Festival.
Excellent. Thank you so much for the interview, Laura. And I have some questions for you. So you already mentioned what your role is, but I would like to know a little bit more about what is the Small File Media Festival?
Yeah, we are a festival that invites artists to make videos of very, very low bit rate. And the purpose of that is to draw attention to the carbon footprint of streaming video and the carbon footprint of the internet as a whole, which is about 4% of all global greenhouse gas emissions. So that's the same as the airline industry, and it's growing really fast. So we started the festival to show that you can have movies that are beautiful and attractive with great stories and don't use all that bandwidth and all that electricity.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. And I just also wanted to know a little bit about, how can people be involved in the Small File Media kind of festival, and how can they, if they want to watch like their favorite show or, of some sorts, like I know that there's a process in terms of, compressing it so that way it's more sustainable. And I'm just wondering how can we share that with our audience?
Yeah. If you want to get involved in the Small File Media Festival, send us a video. The deadline this year is June 15th, and all the information about how to make small file videos and how to apply how to make a submission is at smallfile.ca. So just go there. And Sanjana, you're also asking how can people have a smaller streaming carbon footprint in their everyday life, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, of course, streaming less would be good because a lot of people spend many hours a day, watching videos on our phones and watching them on the big screen and maybe even watching them in Peloton and things like that. So just being a little bit more mindful about how much we stream is a way to decrease the pressure on networks and data centers and our own devices, because those are the three ingredients of information and communication technologies. But an easy way to do it is just in the streaming platform to decrease the resolution as far as you can stand. Like a lot of people like to stream videos from YouTube, and usually that's just for the music. So you can just go ahead and decrease the resolution to the very lowest. I forget what that is, maybe 180 um, pixels. Um, but yeah, so if it's a show that you don't need high resolution for, just go ahead and decrease the resolution. if you're watching on your phone, probably 360p or even 240p is plenty. And then, save the high resolution streaming for special events when you want to watch a nice movie on a larger screen, for example. Um, the main thing that all of us can do as individuals to keep our to decrease our contribution to the carbon footprint of streaming is to keep our devices for as long as possible
Hmm.
because our phones and other devices are a third to a half of that whole carbon footprint. And that's because when they are manufactured in factories, mostly in China, Korea, Taiwan, India, um, a lot of energy goes into their production, and that energy is often fueled by fossil fuels or a mix of fossil fuels and other energy sources. So when we receive our brand new phone, it's actually got on average already about 90% of its carbon footprint just from all the electricity that went into its production. So the more years we keep our phones, the smaller its carbon footprint becomes. That's one easy thing that you can do. And it's kind of cool to proudly say, yeah, I've got an iPhone 6 and it still works great, for example.
Yeah, definitely. There's always like a new trend or a new phone coming out, but I definitely agree, right? Being really mindful of the source of, our technology as well is really important. And I had a follow-up question because for those of us who aren't super tech savvy, how do we decrease the resolution to the to our devices or to the videos that we're streaming?
Mm-hmm. It's right in the streaming platform. Some of them make it really easy. Um, let's see, Vimeo, you can do it. Vimeo gives you an option of a menu for resolution. YouTube, um, I just looked it up, and to decrease the quality, I mean, the resolution on YouTube, you go into your account and you go to settings and you choose resolution, and it will set the resolution you want, and it'll stay that way until you change it again. So if you're really only using YouTube for music and maybe like cooking shows or slime, which doesn't have to be high resolution. You could try 240p and see how that goes.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Laura, for clarifying that. That is perfect. And it seems like something that's very easy and quick to do. It doesn't take a lot of your time, but like you mentioned, it creates a great environmental impact because you just have to go to settings and then change your resolution. So,
Mhm.
yeah, it's very accessible. And I also wanted to kind of ask you, Laura, what inspired you to start Small File Media Festival?
Mhm. Well, I guess I'd been noticing that just over a span of a few years, everybody was streaming. Everybody was moving from watching movies in other forms, like good old DVDs, to streaming, and streaming platforms were offering higher and higher resolution. Um, Companies were selling 4K TVs and now even 8K TVs. So there's just this crazy drive for higher and higher resolution. And I study films, and I know that high resolution doesn't equal a beautiful and powerful film experience. But I think these companies, the hardware companies and the telecoms and the streaming platforms are trying to convince us that high resolution is always better, and ignoring the fact that it's using up more and more electricity, which is just not sustainable given given global warming and that uh, as a planet, on the planet, people in wealthy countries are using more and more and more electricity for things that we never used to. So I thought, let's show that movies can be low resolution and still beautiful and enjoyable.
Mm. Yeah, that's a great point. And also, I'm sure you've seen really wonderful submissions and work over the, I think, like past 5 years or so,
Mhm.
that are low resolution but have still great quality, enjoyment, and fun. Would you be able to elaborate a little bit on that? Any of your favorite submissions and what kind of categories can you see them in?
Mhm. Yeah, well, I mean, we've shown hundreds of movies, and there's so many different styles. A lot of people really work to maintain a very nice, crisp, high resolution, and they make a narrative film or a documentary that's just beautiful and absorbing. Other people experiment with what happens when you use compression and it gets blocky, or you use data moshing to get this kind of flow in the image. So there's both kind of a direct narrative, high, a look of high resolution, but at a low bit rate, and people who are really experimenting with compression as a platform. And we get so many different kinds of movies. We do get some kind of social media formats like dance movies, cat videos. We get a lot of narratives. We get a lot of animation. Um, um, there's a really huge variety, and also from many countries around the world. We get a lot of love stories, actually. Um, we get slapstick movies, we get very experimental movies, um, a huge variety. Everyone is different, and everyone uses a different method to get that 1.44 megabytes per minute um, criterion.
Yeah, that's amazing. And do you have any like favorites or anything, or no
Oh,
favorites?
oh, it's so hard. I love so many of them. Let me think of just one for you. Um, okay, there's this young woman. She's actually a student at SFU, and she's from Kazakhstan. And she was on a film shoot in Kazakhstan with all that looked like a history film about Mongol warriors. So you have these warriors on horseback, flags and everything. It all looks like an ancient spectacle. But she used data moshing, which is this technique to kind of make the images all flow into each other. So you have this crazy flowing Mongols on horseback spectacle, and then at the end, the camera kind of pans and you see the whole production crew. So uh, it's just really perfect, both, to be like really large scale narrative and this very kind of uh, effective data moshing technique that it just feels very funny to watch, and then stepping back with a frame within the frame. But that's just one example, and there's so many. Some that are hilarious. There's a beautiful animation we got last summer, quite a long, like a 10-minute story about this. I think it's about a teenage boy who has a crush on his male friend, and he can only confess it to him in this animated space in a video game, or one of them is a robot and the other one is a cloud. So it's a beautiful love story, and about like going deep into a video game as a way of kind of staying in the closet. Yeah, like made me cry a little bit. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
just two out of hundreds. People can actually see a lot of small file movies on our site. Right now, we've just got a few of our greatest hits. available for people to look at when they're working on their own small file movies. But we are fixing up our archive, so pretty soon people will be able to see all the movies from previous years that the artists gave us permission to show.
Oh wow. That's beautiful. Yeah, and it seems like, some of the videos are even, bringing light to like social issues too, right? Or like, just personal experiences. So it just seems like a very nice variety, and it's also helping the environment. And
Mm-hmm.
and anyone can do it. And it doesn't seem to take much effort or
Mm-hmm.
resources at all to do that.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, it's amazing.
It takes you have to have creativity and a good idea and using your creativity, but but you're right, Sanjana, you don't need much equipment. It's actually better if you use an old phone or an old camera that doesn't have high resolution. And then there are there's a lot of things you can do that don't need compression. Like you can make a film with just a series of still images and a beautiful, rich soundtrack. Or you can shoot a video and then use compression software to shrink it down to about 3% of its former um, bit rate. And we have tutorials on our site about how to use different kinds of compression software like uh, Handbrake and FFmpeg and other ones. So yeah, it's very maker friendly small file media.
Yeah, definitely. And that's the most important thing to me, at least, like accessibility, right? Like, and
Mhm.
anyone can kind of help the environment in this small action. So yeah, I think it's really, really wonderful. Um, and I wanted to ask you, just came to my mind actually, is are there any like common misconceptions or concerns that you hear people kind of bring up when they're like, oh, I don't know if I can really make the video, or just misconceptions in general about the topic that you would want to debunk?
Hmm. Uh, yeah, well, sometimes people think, oh, is it going to be, difficult to use compression software? But it's not. Our tutorials make it easy. You just experiment a little bit. Um, but I think the most important um, myth to debunk is that, the internet is immaterial because people still, talk about it being virtual and, the term the cloud, cloud really means a linked off-site set of data centers. So the cloud is not cloudy at all. It's heavy and chugging a lot of electricity and usually a lot of fossil fuels. So I really, really want people to start thinking about the materiality of the media we use and just being mindful that when we get a little video on our phone or another screen. It's traveled through a network. It's been stored on a data center. And as I talked about before, our devices themselves are very electricity intensive. So just appreciating that and and maybe uh, using more green viewing practices like watching TV. Watching TV is less of a strain on the environment than streaming, and it's more social. Or you can, I love to get DVDs from the library. I know that somebody of your age thinks of DVDs as a really antiquated technology. They work perfectly fine, and just you just get an external DVD drive, and there you are. Or going to the movies is a great thing
Hmm.
to do if you really want to have that immersive experience. And again, it's also social because one thing about individual streaming media that streams to our own devices is that it's usually just one person watching. So it tends to divide us from each other. Whereas media that unite us because we're all sitting and watching a screen together, um, I think those just make people feel good.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. And if more people are watching together, then we're not all consuming so much of electricity, hopefully. And yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's, and yeah, exactly. Like you mentioned, the social aspect and
Mhm.
the connection. And, actually, I think, being connected to one another also makes us feel more responsible to one
Mhm.
another as well. Like my carbon footprint affects other people,
Mhm.
especially like in the global south as well. Like a lot of the things that happens here in Western countries, we end up, dumping a lot of garbage in southern countries, and and a lot of times they're the ones that end up experiencing the flooding and the impact and so on. So feeling that
Exactly.
responsibility to other citizens is so important.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. It's just so unfair. Because with streaming, as with just about everything else, it really is the people in the wealthy countries of the global north that have pushed these technologies to an unsustainable point. Um, and while we in the wealthy countries are enjoying 4K videos, um, people in the global south are experiencing drought and floods, and also having all of our electronic waste sent to countries like India and China to um, to dispose of. So it's just not fair.
Yeah, definitely. And we have this misconception that, oh, well, they don't care about the environment and hence they're getting the effects of it. And I think, yeah, this conversation is so important because we don't realize it's actually us that's harming them. And
Yep,
they're actually probably, they consume the least, but they end up actually experiencing the most drastic effects.
exactly.
Yeah. And just because um, our recording will soon be ending, I do have two final questions.
Mhm.
One, what are some of the Small File Media Festival's accomplishments and any future goals that you guys have? I know you
Mhm.
spoke of some, but I'm really excited to hear a little bit more.
Uh-huh. Okay, well, we are getting more and more recognized around the world. We got some government grants so that we can afford to keep operating. So that's great from the BC Arts Council and the Canada Council. And I got a big grant from the Guggenheim Foundation in the United States, and part of that is going to help us set up small file workshops all around the world, actually focusing on countries in the global south. And that's going to be so cool because in places where people have only a 2G network, you can still, so large files will not travel on a 2G network, but small files will. So these workshops are going to teach people around the world in places with lighter infrastructure how to make small file movies and share them. So I'm really expecting that in the next year or two, the small file movement is going to take off around the world.
Yeah. That's amazing. And you guys already have, like, when I was connected and working with you guys, I remember like there were submissions from like all over the world. So I feel like
Mhm.
you're already impacting so many people, and I think your message is so important.
Mhm.
But
Thank
yeah,
you.
is there anything else that before we wrap up the interview, is there anything else that you'd like to share or elaborate
Mhm.
on?
I just want to say, small files they're good for the environment, as we've been emphasizing. They're unique works of art, and they're, as I was just saying, they're good for places that have light infrastructure. So they have all these beautiful qualities about them. And I really hope that your audience will check out the festival and maybe come to the festival, which is in October 19th to 20th at the Cinematheque in Vancouver and also streaming online. And I hope some folks will send us their small file movies.
Everyone, please do check them out. They're
Yeah.
amazing.